I'd like to welcome Jasmyn, Christina, and Jessica. We are unfortunately not able to have our entire panel with us this morning, though if Meng does join us a little bit later, we will absolutely add Meng to the discussion. So I'd love to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their area of study. As you know, all of our panelists this morning are grad students. And Jasmyn, because you're first on the list, I would love if you could start with the introductions, and then Christina will go next, and then Jessica. And again, for those joining us, if anything, sparks or inspires you to ask a question, feel free to submit it, and we will be tracking those questions. So Jasmyn, maybe you want to just take us away.
For sure. Thank you so much, Kate, and good morning, everyone. So my name is Jasmyn, and I graduated from Guelph, Bachelor of Arts and Science in 2019, and my minors were neuroscience and psychology. And I'm currently finishing up my Master's of Counselling Psychology at Western University in London, which was a 2-year master's, and I hope to eventually pursue a career as a psychologist. So I'm hoping to continue my graduate studies and do a doctoral degree. But right now I'm just finishing up my master's. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jasmyn. Welcome. And are you in London this morning?
I am in London, yes. I'm actually from London, so I came home to do my master's degree, which was kind of nice. But yes, I am in London currently as well.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Great to have you. Christina, would you like to go next?
So hi, everyone. My name is Christina. I also graduated from Guelph back in 2019, but the full semester. And I had I was in the BAS program, and I had specializations in psych, brain and cognition and marketing. So currently I am a first year occupational therapy student at the University of Toronto at the St. George's campus. So a lot of people don't know what occupational therapy is, but I just explain occupational therapy or an occupational therapist as someone who helps people return to the activities that are important to them. So that's pretty broad, but that's good because it means occupational therapy is super interdisciplinary. And you get to consider lots of different things. So my goal at the end is to be an occupational therapist.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Christina. And Jessica.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jessica, and I am a master's student here at Guelph University. I did graduate from the undergrad program, or in the biomedical department as well here at Guelph. I'm doing a Master's of Science, and it's a thesis work, so a bit different than the other panels. Essentially, my research is in the fields of neuroscience, endocrinology, and toxicology. And in a nutshell, I'm looking at how bisphenols impact brain and behavior. Now, you commonly know bisphenols probably as BPA. So a lot of our plastic water bottles have that little label that say BPA free. So my question is, what's replacing BPA? And those are other bisphenols like BPS and BPF. And essentially, I'm determining whether or not those are safe for consumer products.
Fantastic. It sounds like you all have such fantastic grad school stories. You're all doing different things, but again, you all had really your roots at Guelph, and I'm sure the students joining us today are really excited to learn more about what you're working on. Thank you so much, Jessica. So I would love to dive into a question. Again, some of you studied arts and sciences. And so really the spirit of this conference is talking about the career possibilities that come from interdisciplinary study. And for those, I mean, Jessica, it sounds like you studied mostly in the science field, but for those of you who did arts or sciences or both, how do you feel your Guelph education set you up for academic success that you are enjoying now as grad students?
I can answer that one first, and then Christina, if you want to add on. So yeah, I did a Bachelor of Arts in Science, and as I mentioned, my specializations were in neuroscience and psychology. So for me, they were quite related and really kind of fed into one another, which I loved. And I found, what I was learning in the science courses was really kind of bolstering what I was learning in my psych or my arts courses. But I think having an interdisciplinary background really just gives such a unique perspective and kind of allows you to consider like multiple lenses when thinking about, research questions or just critical thinking. And so I think really highlighting that unique kind of background can really help in graduate school. And for me, because my specializations were so related, I think that having both of those lenses really helped me in grad school and continues to kind of help me that way.
Did you want to add on, Christina?
Sure. So I was also in arts and sciences, and my specializations of psych, brain, and cognition and marketing probably don't seem the most related to occupational therapy. But despite that, I feel like, having that interdisciplinary background is super important within occupational therapy, and has allowed me to kind of combine knowledge from both the arts and sciences and translate knowledge across disciplines, which at least in my field is super important. Like even in occupational therapy, one of my first papers was about taking a paper from a different healthcare profession and putting it into an occupational therapy lens and figuring out how to use that knowledge in occupational therapy. And that's a super like BAS thing that we got to do. So yeah, it's really come in handy.
Fantastic. And what about you, Jessica? How has your undergraduate journey really informed your current research? And it sounds like you're in a very incredibly important area of study, but what really sparked that for you in your undergrad?
Yeah, so my undergrad was a bachelor's of science, and I did a biomedical science major with a neuroscience minor. So the neuroscience minor definitely played into my research now as I'm investigating brain and behavior. So that was really important, and it sparked the interest in behavioral work with rodents. I found Guelph as a whole was really conducive to opportunity, and I was able to dabble in a lot of labs and different departments. So that was definitely helpful for graduate school as well.
That's great. And having maybe that cross section, just as the other two panelists, gave you a bit of that interdisciplinary approach that has really led you to where you are. I know that a lot of students who are in their undergraduate now, they sometimes don't even know where to start when it comes to grad school. I'm wondering if you can take yourselves back to maybe, I don't know, third year, fourth year, where you're starting to think, okay, I think I want to go to grad school. Where do you start? Where do you really hone in on what it is that you want to do? Because you do have to specialize in a way. And for those of you who had an arts and sciences background, or again, a broad undergraduate experience, how do you even start to narrow what you want to do after your undergrad? Any one of you can start. I just think that that's probably something a lot of our students are curious about.
I can start. For me, I think it was really thinking about what courses got me excited. And I think in our first and our second year, we're in very kind of broad and general courses. But as you enter your third and your fourth year of undergrad, it gives you the opportunity to kind of have a little bit more selection, maybe choose courses that are more specific. And that was kind of when I started to realize there were certain courses that I was really, really enjoying. And so from there, I started to talk to people that were in upper years of my program, as well as started to explore kind of a couple of different options for grad school. I also was considering doing a master's in speech and language pathology. So I kind of talked to people that were in both fields, so my current field of psychology as well as speech and language, to just learn a little bit more. If there's opportunities for volunteering within the kind of graduate school or area that you want to go into, I think that's, again, really important in a way to kind of dabble in and see, what you like and what you don't like. But I think really thinking about what courses you're passionate about, what areas you want to kind of learn more, have more questions about, and then use that as kind of a starting point.
That's great advice. Really starting with those inspiring courses is, I think, something a lot of undergraduate students can relate to. And I think it's really important, Jasmyn, that you've identified that there was another path that you were considering that probably would have been just as exciting, but it takes that self-reflection to figure out where you want to go next.
Yeah, and I think it's like you can change your mind at any point either. And even, if you do grad school or 1 or 2 years, you can still change your mind. I know we often feel the pressure that we have to know exactly what we want to do, but, there's always lots of different options.
Great point. Absolutely. Jessica, Christina, did you want to comment on that as well? How did you even sort of hone in on what you're doing now?
I can definitely speak from a perspective of feeling lost in 3rd and 4th year.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I thought I had to choose a career path. So I really leaned on mentors to kind of guide me through it. 2 professors I highly admire helped me choose the master's program I'm in now. And essentially the key takeaway from a lot of their discussions was it's okay not to know. You can change your path later on. And graduate school has actually helped me choose my career. So I've decided to branch into the educational field and leave research behind, unfortunately, but maybe I'll come back to it in the end, do full circle, who knows. Career paths can be rather wiggly, so that's kind of how I strive forward with it all.
I think wiggly is a perfect word that we should just embrace in this panel this morning. I think that mentorship factor is really important. And I'm just wondering, Jessica, when you were seeking that advice, what was the best way that you found you could approach some of your faculty mentors to talk about grad school? Did you go to office hours? Did you sort of book an appointment? Just how did you get that conversation rolling?
Yeah, so one of the professors I had a course with, and I went to office hours, and then eventually our discussions just turned into, how was your week? What did you do? And very casual conversations. And then the other one was a lab that I was volunteering in, and through our lab conversations, again, they just became rather casual and developed a mentorship that way.
That's great. And was it, you say you volunteered for a lab. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more. We've had a question come in about how did you find those opportunities to work in different labs on campus?
Yeah, so in total, I got my foot into 3 different labs. In 4th year, I did an undergraduate research project, and that was in the molecular and cellular biology department with Dr. Perot. And that was really valuable in the sense that it got me exposed to a lot of neuroscience. So that came through the undergrad program, and I highly advise any students thinking about it to definitely do it, especially if your graduate school is on your radar. It just gives you a little bit of exposure to lab skills and possibly manuscript write-up and whatnot. The second one was a work study opportunity, and that was in the pathobiology department with Dr. Wood. So that came through applying through the online work study program. And then the last one was a collaboration with one of the labs I was currently in, and that brought me into the biomedical department.
That's fantastic. Sounds like you really leveraged those different avenues to get into those different labs. Great advice for our students who are wanting to kind of find those experiential learning opportunities in their undergraduate time. And Christina, how did you come to occupational therapy?
Yeah, so I had a very similar path to Jasmyn. I kind of wiggled around and looked at a lot of different things. But I didn't even know occupational therapy was a career until a few years ago. And it was just through conversations with friends and family that I discovered it. And I did some research into it. And then I took volunteering opportunities and shadowing opportunities so I could learn better what occupational therapy was. And part of it was also I did some independent studies during my undergrad. And I did one in psych-based stuff and one in marketing-based stuff, and I kind of knew that I was leaning towards the psych, and I enjoyed doing research in that area. So that kind of brought me more to occupational therapy, was kind of more psych-based, but still like pretty broad, and there were lots of opportunities within occupational therapy to do different things.
That's fantastic. And did you find it difficult to hone in on something specific after you had done such a interdisciplinary undergraduate program?
I did, and that's kind of why I really love occupational therapy, is because occupational therapy is super interdisciplinary. And like once you get into occupational therapy, there are a million different practice areas that you can go into, and specializations, and like different subject areas that you can pursue. So I think by choosing occupational therapy, I was almost like deciding not to choose right away, and leaving myself that opportunity to continue to explore and continue to pursue interdisciplinary education.
Fantastic. It sounds like you all had such great great foundations to be able to do what you're doing now. I'm wondering if we can touch on some of those maybe anxieties that come with grad school. What advice would you give to a student who says, I'm afraid I won't even get into grad school? Should I even apply? What should I do if I'm nervous about that? I wonder if you can speak to maybe some of those sort of moments of self-doubt as you're taking that next step, and what advice you would share now that you are where you are today.
I can speak to that. I was very afraid applying to graduate school. There were a lot of times where I almost psyched myself out and did not apply because I was just convinced that I had no shot. And like there are forums online where you can see people who are applying, and I was like comparing myself to those people and thinking that I wouldn't stack up. But I think the big thing is like you don't know until you apply. And the only way you can figure that out is by applying. So I kind of just had to like calm myself down, be like, you're overthinking this, and kind of just go for it and do the best that I can, and have confidence in my experiences and what I brought to the table. And yeah, just really hoped that I would get in, and luckily it worked out.
That's great. Yeah, and congratulations. I mean, for all of you, it's a major milestone to be in a graduate program, but that's great advice. You don't really know unless you put yourself out there. Jessica, Jasmyn, did you have any other advice or tidbits that relate to Christina's answer?
I can definitely speak to the admission part a little bit. So at least here at Guelph, the application with regards to how they analyze it, it's 40% towards your transcript, and then the rest is towards personal experiences and your references and your statement of interest. So the grades aren't the be-all end-all of graduate school, which is nice compared to some professional programs. So you definitely have, with regards to transcripts, don't psych yourself out if you have a couple low courses with regards to grades and whatnot. With regards to anxieties about it, my best piece of advice would be don't take yourself out of the game, because you definitely have more of a chance than you probably think, especially when you're in a stressful situation, such as applying to numerous schools and whatnot.
Great advice.
Yeah, and I think building on both Jessica and Christina, who made great points, and I would agree that, you don't know until you try and put yourself out there. But also, it's okay if you don't get in the first time, and there's lots of grad schools that might take multiple tries to get into, and that's totally fine too. And I think, take those years of maybe not getting in and try and build some experience or make connections or any of those kinds of things as well. But recognizing it can be super competitive, and every program and every school is a little bit different. So don't be afraid to hear no. I know it's like really challenging at the time, but everything kind of works out as it should.
Fantastic. Jasmyn, we've had a question come in specifically for you. Can you maybe speak to any of the field experience that you might have had before grad school? Sort of maybe I think how Jessica was describing a bit of her lab experience. If you did, how did you find those opportunities on campus?
Yeah, so I had both kind of some, I'll call it clinical experience, but and research experience as well. So I think it's really important to look at the programs you're applying and see what those prerequisites are. So for the program I was applying to, you needed to have a certain number of hours of, I think they called it like helping experience. And for me, I sought out different kind of work experience. So I worked in residence for a few years when I was on campus, and that kind of really helped me to find other connections and other avenues for volunteering. And then I also volunteered with the Student Support Network, which is very much kind of related to what I'm doing now. And again, just attending those kind of volunteer club days and seeing what things are out there and talking to other people who have similar interests, and finding those kind of volunteer opportunities. And those were specific to Guelph, but if you're home in the summer or in the greater Guelph community, trying to find any kind of volunteer experience as well can be really helpful, and just not being afraid again to reach out. And some people might say no, or they might not be interested in having volunteers, or it might not fit, and that's totally okay. But it kind of gets to that point when you're applying to grad school, you kind of have to set yourself up and prepare to kind of be ready to hear no every now and then. It gets common and you'll get used to it, and it's never easy, but yeah, I think there are lots of opportunities. It's just about finding what kind of interests you and then building off of those.
Wonderful. Thanks for that answer. And Christina, I'll extend that question to you as well. In terms of your particular program, did you need any experiential learning or practical experience before you applied to the program?
So for occupational therapy, they don't specify, at least in Ontario, they don't specify a set number of hours or anything. I think if you're applying out of province to UBC or Calgary, they might. But they do, like, you do have to write personal statements, and in those you're supposed to outline kind of like why you chose occupational therapy and what your knowledge of the profession is. So I feel like for me, it was really important that I did have those volunteering experiences to be able to refer to. Also for occupational therapy, every school is different. So I think Western, you have to write the Casper, Mac, you have to do multiple mini interviews, and then other schools you just write. So for all of those things, having volunteering experiences in lots of different areas and working experiences was really important to be able to draw from, and bring in like practical experience as well as academic.
Wonderful. So what was the exam you said? It was called the Casper?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what that is?
So I think it's supposed to test kind of more like clinical reasoning skills and like ethical reasoning. So it was just like ethical scenarios, and then you have to respond to them, and you have a limited amount of time to do it. Yeah, so it's not like something that you can really study for a lot. It's more based on kind of your experiences and how you reason through things and what your initial reaction to an ethical situation is.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So I want to dive into a question that talks a little bit about sort of that timing between your undergrad and pursuing grad studies. We have a question: is it common to take a year off between undergrad and grad school? Maybe you could speak to your own experience if you went right into a grad program or if you took a little bit of time in between. And in your experience, or maybe if you know colleagues who have gone through this same process, does it maybe make it harder to get into grad school if you've taken that year off?
I can comment on that. I didn't take a full year off, but I did graduate in the December semester, or the full semester in December of 2019, and then I took 7 months off, and then I started in occupational therapy. So as far as I know, that didn't have any impact on it. For me, it was actually really valuable. I was able to work for Ontario Disability Services in that time, so that was helpful financially to build up some money to pay for grad school, and also just for like getting experience working with people with disabilities. When I applied to occupational therapy, I was like, I want to work with kids. And then after working at ODSP, I was like, nope, I want to work with adults. These are the people that I want to be working with. So it completely changed my viewpoint. And so it was super valuable for me. It was hard getting back into school, but like, I feel like we've been doing it for so many years. You pick it up quick. It's like second nature at a certain point. So
that's great. That time can really, like you said, show you maybe or realign you in terms of what you actually want to do. I think that's really valuable advice. Jessica, Jasmyn, did you have any comments as well on sort of that? Did you consider some time off? Did you take time off in between? What are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, so for me, I went right into grad school after completing my undergrad. So I graduated in June and started my master's in September. And for me, that was really helpful, and I loved kind of just the continuation. But I know specifically within my current program and some peers of mine that also graduated from BAS that a lot of people did take time off or applied a couple of times. And so there was that year. And I don't think at all that hurts your application. I think it actually allows for you to have more research experience or more practical experience or work. Like there's lots of things you can do. And I don't think that grad schools, in my experience, look at that year off as a negative thing, but rather maybe a period of time to kind of build that CV and figure out maybe even what you're interested in as well. So I don't think if you're not 100% sure, I don't think there's a rush to kind of jump right into grad school right after graduating.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I guess I'll just briefly add my own personal experience as well. So I graduated in the winter of 2019 and then started in the fall 2019 as well, similar to Jasmyn. And I essentially took the 4 months off in the summer to kind of recharge and get ready for my next degree. So that was valuable in the sense that I was ready to go come the fall, and I was able to kind of discuss projects throughout the summer with my supervisor as well, so that there were no delays once I got back to school.
Fantastic. You've all had different experiences with that time. I think that's a great answer, in that if you do decide to take some time off, embrace that time, see what that time can do for you, and then allow it to make you even more successful in your next step. So I want to take you back to applying for grad school. Again, a lot of undergraduates joining us today might be thinking about, okay, the whole process can be a little bit daunting to even apply. It's a lot of work to apply for grad school, particularly when you're a full-time student. So we have one question in from a student saying, can you maybe talk about getting references from profs? So Jessica, you mentioned that references are a big component to your application. You're really maybe reflecting on who those mentors, those formative faculty members have been in your undergraduate career. Can you maybe talk about what that journey was like for you, and maybe some tips on how to ensure that you get a strong letter from a faculty member who can represent, your potential?
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned earlier, I had two professors that kind of act as mentors throughout my third and fourth year. So them rolling into a reference position kind of just happened naturally, with asking them near the end of fourth year if they'd be comfortable with it. When it comes to references, I would say the amount of time that they've known you for is important. So they'd known me for at least a year or year and a half before I even asked for that possible reference letter. I know at least for thesis work here at the University of Guelph, there's a checklist that they essentially evaluate you on, and this is available online if you kind of want to know what your reference will have to speak to. So again, with regards to who they may be, it can be professors, it can be courses that you've gone into and then developed relationships with the course instructor. Essentially just trying to get to know them more, and being present in their life is going to help you with obtaining that reference letter. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. Jasmyn, Christina, did you have anything you wanted to add? That was a very fulsome answer, Jessica. Thank you. Oh, Jasmyn, we
Sorry.
can't hear you.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I think I turned it on and then turned it off again. I think it can be daunting kind of asking for those letters. But think about like as you get into your third and your fourth year courses and the class sizes start to get a little bit smaller, take advantage of those opportunities to kind of, ask questions to the instructor or professor and start to build that relationship so that they kind of know who you are can be helpful. And then, of course, if you're involved in research as well, a supervisor is kind of a natural person that can provide a reference letter, but also not being afraid to ask non-academic people. I know certain programs specify you need, 2 academic references and 1 non. So thinking about that as well, whether that be a manager or a supervisor from a job or volunteer experience, and kind of build those relationships as well a little bit.
Fantastic.
I can add on to that a little bit as well.
Great.
So for occupational therapy, you need 1 academic and 1 professional reference. So it's a little bit different. I found in terms of the academic reference, I took the honors research seminar in my fourth year through the BAS program. And I found that that was a really important place to kind of build a relationship with a professor. I'm definitely a more quiet, introverted person, so I really had to force myself to like go to office hours with professors and try to build those relationships, and that was important. And then in terms of the professional reference, I got that through volunteering opportunities on campus, specifically through being involved with VASA was really important for me, and just building relationships with people within the BAS program, whether those were professors or administrators or just other people. So those were really important for me.
Wonderful. Sounds like leveraging all of those relationships can be really valuable at that reference letter stage. I hope that helps for those of you who are thinking about that process and getting letters. Christina, you mentioned a process in terms of maybe this wasn't your experience, but some programs similar to yours, having this concept of mini interviews for grad school. So wondering if that was your experience, if you did mini interviews, and for any of you, if you have any advice or insight that you could share on how to best prepare for that sort of stage of the application, whether it's, mini interviews or some kind of in-person interview component that is above and beyond the actual paper application that you put in.
Yeah, so I did have to do the multiple mini interview for McMaster does that for occupational therapy. And it was a very stressful experience. I was lucky where it was online the year I did it because COVID had started by then. But for preparing for it, I just did a lot of research into occupational therapy. There are like Canadian Journal of Occupational Therapy, so I just read a load of papers that were related to occupational therapy and like current research that was going on. But I found that once I was in the interview, a lot of the questions that were being asked, I really relied on kind of my experiences and things I had learned in my courses during undergraduate. And just finding ways to bring those experiences in to demonstrate that I had the practical skills as well. Something I found really important during the interviews was just taking a breath. If you didn't know what to say, just stopping for a minute and being like, I'm just going to think, and then responding, because it is pretty quick where you're kind of thrown into a big room and then you're thrown into a breakout room and you have, I think, a minute to look at the question and then respond. So doing that over and over can be a lot. Really taking that time was important.
Fabulous advice. Take that breath. Even in a mini interview, it can be helpful to pause. Jessica, Jasmyn, did you have any interview component with your programs?
Yeah, I did. And I think the biggest kind of takeaway is just really being yourself and being confident. A lot of the time when you kind of get to those final stages of grad school interviews, I know for me interviewing with potential thesis supervisors and things, it's also kind of a match of best fit and they want to just get to know you and see what you're interested in. So really just knowing why you're applying to this program and why you want to be there and kind of speaking to that as well. I feel like there was one other thing I was going to add and I can't remember, so I'll let Jessica go, and if I think about it, I'll come back.
Sounds great. No problem.
So I had a very similar experience to Jasmyn, where I had to do interviews with the supervisors to kind of narrow down which labs I was working in, and then succeeding in those and obtaining one. But I also had the opportunity to do meet and greets with potential lab mates. So although it was kind of nerve-wracking going into a room with essentially everyone in the lab and them wondering if I'm going to be a good fit, it was definitely valuable for me to figure out if the lab environment was something that I would enjoy. So definitely something to take to take advantage of if you get the opportunity to.
That's great. I think that's an important point, Jessica, that you're also, as much as you are being interviewed, you're also interviewing to some extent of wanting to make sure that it's a good fit for you. That's a really good point. I think that's valuable when it comes to the interview stage. Jasmyn, if you have your other nugget of wisdom, feel free to share, or we can come back to the question again. No problem.
Yeah, no, it came back to me.
Oh,
what I
good.
was going to say was when you're preparing, sometimes the most helpful thing is just practicing saying some of those things out loud. I think, we often write out what we want to say and we see it on a screen, but actually, having a friend or a family member, somebody kind of just ask you broad questions and practicing just getting used to answering those questions and saying those things out loud can be super helpful for when you actually do end up having to say them out loud as well.
Great advice. Yeah, get your mouth around the words. It's very different when you have to speak it. Wonderful. I hope that that's answered that question. Fabulous advice from all three of you. Now, Christina, you mentioned that you had your interviews digitally because COVID had arrived at that point. So all of you, I am assuming, based on your timelines, have been impacted by COVID. Your grad experience has looked different than maybe you had originally imagined. So I'm wondering how it has been to transition from a quote unquote normal grad program experience to something that's been happening in COVID, and you've had to do a lot of this in a digital environment. Can you maybe speak to some of those challenges and maybe some of the benefits to being online? Anyone can start. It's no problem. Christina, go for it.
Sure. So for me, I've been online pretty much the entire time. I just had a 3-day placement, which was in person, but other than that, it's been entirely online. So I haven't met anyone in my program yet. So that's been a pretty unique experience. It's definitely been difficult being online. It's hard to make those connections with professors and your classmates. But I think just really making an effort to go to office hours and reach out to your classmates has been important for me, and like developing those connections and kind of a little bit of a support network, because it can definitely feel isolating at times. I'm sure everyone can relate to that, like being in your bedroom, staring at your computer screen, doing lectures and stuff. So it has been quite a switch, but that has also been a lot of benefits. Obviously, I don't have to live in Toronto right now, so financially, that's a really good benefit. And I feel like there's a lot of flexibility, like even being able to be here today, because my lectures are online and they're often recorded. I have kind of more of a flexible schedule and I can fit additional stuff in. So yeah, definitely pros and cons.
That's great. Well, we're so glad that you're able to join us, because the online environment is a bit more conducive to these kinds of activities, which is great.
I guess I can add a little bit there. My personal experience was COVID, when it hit last March, was my second semester of my master's degree, where you kind of start doing your lab work rather than doing your literature review, which kind of encompasses the first semester. So right when I was supposed to get into the labs shut down, which kind of put a wrench in my plans. But it only took about 3 or so months for the labs to create a protocol where we can come in one by one if we book times and do what we need to do. So although training with another person was a bit of a hiccup, I took that time to create a manuscript and possibly publish that I'm working towards now. So I definitely used that sitting at home time to do something productive. And now I'm in the lab and it's full-fledged, so even with COVID around, it's nice to be back in there.
And you've been feeling good being back, Jessica, to have that sort of in-person experience. Despite COVID, it's felt good to you to go back onto campus.
Yes, it's felt completely safe. Everyone's
Good.
wearing masks. There's hand sanitizer everywhere. The rooms I work in have capacities posted right on the doors, and we have little signs that we flip if you're occupying the room.
Perfect.
So no one ever enters when you're in there. Yeah, it's been good so far.
Wonderful. Glad you're enjoying being back on campus. I know I miss it desperately. Jasmyn, do you want to talk about your experience, especially because I know you've had a placement as well, so wondering what that has looked like for you.
Yeah, so similar to Jessica, COVID kind of hit when I was in the second semester of my master's. So I was lucky to have the first semester fully in person, and then we kind of switched like everyone else to that online model, which definitely was challenging. And I had a similar experience with research kind of being halted and learning to be flexible in that. But yes, right now I am doing an in-person internship. So I'm working as a psych associate at one of the school boards here in London because they're all open. So I have been lucky to get in person, which is lucky. But I know that within my program, there's lots of people doing internships elsewhere that are fully online. So I think schools have done a really good job of trying to make the experience as good as they can. And one of the things I would say, if you're an undergrad now taking advantage of COVID and lots of research being online, if you are interested in a school that's kind of outside of Guelph or in a different city, potentially reaching out to some of those supervisors and seeing if there's any online opportunities for research, and starting to build those connections and taking advantage of the fact that you don't necessarily have to be living in that city could be helpful as well.
That's a perfect segue into a question that's just come in. And maybe Jessica, you could speak to this as well, because I think students aren't quite sure sometimes when it comes to graduate research, whether they should ask a professor if there's, a way to get involved in their research, or is it general that professors will make it clear whether there's an opportunity for a student? So wondering if you can maybe speak to that sort of level of initiative that's involved in seeking out opportunities when it comes to furthering your own research and allowing yourself to get immersed maybe in a different topic that your faculty supervisor or mentor is studying.
Yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag when it comes to whether or not professors will make their opportunities in the lab known to you or not. There's no harm in asking. The worst case scenario is they say no and you try a different lab. So my advice would be definitely try to get yourself involved with taking the initiative and asking those questions, whether or not you volunteer or in the online situation. For example, you can do behavioral scoring, which is a lot of computer work. If they have remote software, that's something you could do from home.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to I lost my train of thought.
Oh, that's okay. Again, we can come back to it.
Okay.
Again, we're if it jogs your memory. So you said that we students, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So sometimes faculty will be very maybe open about an opportunity to work in a lab. If you ask and there isn't an opportunity, the worst case scenario is that the faculty member says no. But I think that's great advice to go out there and to connect with faculty to see what opportunities might arise.
I guess one more thing I can add is that there's different ways you can find an opportunity in the lab. So like at Guelph, we have the work studies. There's also the undergraduate research scholarships or assistantships. So those are direct postings online where you can see which opportunities the supervisor has made known. Otherwise, it's just asking that question and online or in person saying, hey, is there anything I can help you with? That'll definitely get you more involved.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. Jasmyn, we can't see your video, but we could hear you. Did you want to add to that question as well?
For sure. I can try and fix my video shows it's on. Is it working now?
Oh, it's a bit in and out, but we can hear
Okay.
you perfectly, so feel free to answer.
Yeah, in my experience, I think just reaching out to supervisors and seeing what's available. As Jessica mentioned, it is kind of dependent on supervisors whether or not they'll post what's available and what's not available. And I know every school and every grad program is different in how you obtain a supervisor for your program. So some you have to secure that before entering the program. Some you get your supervisor once you are already in the program. So I think just looking into some of those processes for how the school kind of makes those decisions, and then offering to volunteer in the lab can be a great starting point, and also kind of dip your toes in, see if that research is for you, and not being afraid to kind of investigate multiple things and not feeling like you need to know exactly what you want to research. It can totally change over the course of your undergrad or your master's or whatever it may be. And once you choose a research area, I feel like we always feel like we're stuck in that research. But there's definitely ways to kind of broaden that and switch areas as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jasmyn. Christina, we've had a question come in specifically for you. We have a student wondering how much of your current coursework is actually a field placement or field work versus how much of it is more traditional course content.
So for my program, we have to do 1,000 hours of clinical work, and that's kind of built into the curriculum. So I think all in all for the 2-year program, it ends up kind of being like half coursework, half clinical.
Right.
Yeah, so those are all facilitated by the school, and they just have placement sites, and we get to rank them, and then we get placed at a placement site to build those clinical skills in whatever area you're interested in.
Fantastic. Thank you. We have a question that's come in, and I think it's sometimes overlooked, and so I want to ask it. Can you maybe just speak to how each of you decided which institution to do your grad work in? I think it's really interesting because there's many factors that can impact a decision on what school you choose. I mean, obviously, all of our undergraduates joining us today probably went through that journey when they were choosing Guelph. I wonder if each of you could just speak briefly to why you ended up at the school that you are currently in.
I can start. So I'm currently at Western, which is in London, and I'm from London. So that was one of the reasons that kind of drew me back to that program. And there was also limited kind of counseling psychology programs. I can't remember exactly how many there are within Ontario or within Canada, but there wasn't too many options. And for me, when I was trying to decide what program, I really compared kind of the different opportunities. So in the current program that I'm in, it really was kind of you had research experience, you got clinical experience and course experience, and that was really important to me. So I wanted to make sure I had those opportunities for an internship and research as well, because I wasn't sure, exactly if I would continue school or not. So looking at kind of those things, and then also when you are entering a program that has a research component, finding a supervisor at a school that kind of fits with what you're interested in as well is really important.
Great answer. I think you've touched on a good point too, that sometimes it depends where in the world you want to be. And I think that's a really valid reason for choosing a specific school. Jessica, what about you? You're still at Guelph, so I would love to know a little bit more about that decision.
Yes, I'm still here, and I think one of the main contributing factors was that I felt so involved with the school that it was hard to leave.
So that's good. We want that in our undergrads for sure.
I had a strong network of professors in the Department of Biomedical Science, so I just kind of naturally became a master's student. It wasn't until late, I would say probably March of my undergrad 4th year, where I was like, okay, I'll do a master's program here. It was more of just a natural, I'm doing research anyways, it's going to flow into a master's program,
right?
Rather than the formalities of making decision after decision. It was very fluent. And the applying process was really easy because it was internal. So that was nice.
Wonderful. Well, we're so glad to have you here, Simone. And Christina, it sounds like with your program, you mentioned there's a couple kind of known specific schools. So I wonder if you could take us through your decision process too.
Yeah, so occupational therapy is similar to counseling, where there are only a few schools that have occupational therapy programs. So I wanted to stay in Ontario, so I applied to all of the Ontario schools. And I ended up picking Toronto just because part of with occupational therapy, like you do field work. So they do recommend that you go to a school in an area where you're going to want to work in the long run. And I was always really interested in mental health and mental illness and that sort of thing. And occupational therapists can work as psychotherapists as well. So Toronto has connections to some of the best mental health hospitals in Canada. So it was kind of just the obvious fit for me. I had always wanted to live in Toronto, and my interest area was based in Toronto. So that's how I ended up there.
Fantastic. Thank you all for those answers. Lots of different factors that play into that journey. And I think those are, it's important to know that it's a multifaceted process. We've had another awesome question come in about what it feels like to transition from your undergrad into grad school. I'm wondering, because each of you would have had such different experiences, can you talk about the learning curve? Is it much more difficult than your undergrad? I think a lot of students want to know that, you know, it might feel like more of a challenge, but that they can do it. Maybe chat a bit more about that learning curve and how different it felt. Maybe Jessica, we could start because you said you kind of flowed from your undergraduate research into a master's. Has it felt different for you, or what's the main thing that stands out to you that feels different?
Yeah, so it definitely flowed well. I would say just there's like, I don't really know how to put it. The undergrad and graduate feel is very different in the sense that I'm not in lectures, I'm not writing exams. I think I had to do a total of 1.5 credits for my entire degree, which is way more than that of undergrad. So those were done in like the first 1 to 2 semesters. So essentially, my graduate work feels more like a job in the sense that I go to the lab, I do my day's work in the lab, I come home, maybe I do some TA stuff and then call it a day. Whereas back in my undergrad, I remember studying until the wee hours of the morning. So I can definitely put some grad work away if I just want to kind of decompress for the evening, which has been a nice transition from undergrad. What else would I say is different? I know undergrad, it was a rough learning curve with the fact that I moved away from home. I was on my own. So all of that didn't happen again with graduate degree. So that part just not being a factor was definitely helpful with the transition.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it can be hard to imagine what grad school feels like when you're so embroiled in that busyness of undergrad that you've identified. But I hope that kind of shows for students that it definitely is a different pace. It's not just sort of another undergraduate experience. Jasmyn, Christina, I'm interested in your answers as well.
Yeah, I would kind of say similar to Jessica. It's very different. For me, I found lots more kind of discussion as opposed to sitting and being lectured. So my program only has 14 students. And so it's very much discussion based, lots of like peer learning and, learning from one another. And my professors in the program kind of, consider us to be colleagues. That's kind of the model of the program, that they're not there to just tell you everything and you soak it up. But it also requires kind of a lot more initiative as well, because you're not just being given that information. So you kind of have to do the reading and kind of make sense of that and ask questions and reflect on it. So I think a lot more critical thinking than an undergrad, and a lot more on you to kind of be reading that material, because you're not being tested on it and nobody is going to be checking whether you did it or not. So it's more about making sure that you're doing those readings so that you understand moving forward. And I think, not really having any exams, but lots more writing than usual. And of course, like the research component looks a little bit different. It's spread over the course of 2 years. And then for me, having like an internship placement again is kind of a different feeling. Like Jessica, it does kind of feel like a work and a job. So yeah, it's definitely different. I've loved it. I think the discussion that you get to have with others is really important. At least that was my experience. But yeah, it's kind of, if you're taking a third or fourth year seminar course, it might be more similar to that. That's what I found, at least.
That's great. Thank you for that answer. And Christina, how has it felt for you? How's the learning curve been?
So my program's a little different just because it is a professional program. So it is all course-based. I still have to do exams and all of that. I think the biggest difference is because it is a professional program, there's a lot of focus on clinical skills and learning different assessments and how to conduct assessments and kind of like hands-on work that you don't necessarily get in your undergrad. So similar to Jasmyn, like our professors are our colleagues, are people we will be working with one day. So in my learning, I feel like I'm more focused on this is stuff that I'm going to need in the workforce, and these are relationships I'm going to need in the workforce as well. So I spend a lot of time like going away and like practicing like interviewing skills and how to conduct assessments and like trying to apply my learning to actual like practical skills. So for me, that's been the biggest transition and biggest change is learning those clinical skills.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like for all of you, it does feel more like a job than school, but you are still working toward that that educational milestone, which is really, really interesting. I think that's an important distinction. We've had a question come in specifically for Jessica, and maybe this can span to Christina and Jasmyn as well. If there's ever a time where you've had to sort of decide to make a pivot. We'd love to hear more about your pivot from research to education. You've mentioned that earlier in the panel. How did you uncover this new direction, and where does it maybe lead you in the future?
Yeah, so with the graduate program, you often have to do a teaching assistant position, or at least you can apply for them. And that kind of got me into the realm of teaching and education. And with COVID hitting back in March, I was able to kind of dedicate some more time to areas that sparked my interest, and that one of them was being a teaching assistant. So I took on some of those roles and became a member of the graduate teaching community here at Guelph and worked through their workshops and learned a lot of theory behind education. That was just the spark for it all. And now I'm going to a faculty of education program at Nipissing University, the Schulich School of Education, and hopefully coming out with a degree to either teach as a high school teacher or potentially branch back into university teaching as a lecturer. And I'll see where it goes from there, but definitely a graduate school opportunity has allowed me to do that pivot.
Fantastic. I'm sure lots of our students would be interested in learning a bit more too about what it means to be a TA. If we have time at the end, we can come back to that topic. Jasmyn, Christina, have you had a moment in maybe in your undergraduate experience or in your current program where you felt that sort of natural pivot or that interest that's really sparked maybe where you are now or where you want to go after this?
For me, I think, as I mentioned, I originally was kind of thinking about speech and language pathology. And when I entered my undergrad, that's kind of what I thought I would be. And I was taking linguistics courses and phonetics courses to kind of prepare for that. And I spent the summers volunteering with speech and language pathologists in the school system and at camps and different things. And I then realized it just wasn't so much for me, and I started to take more specialized psych courses and neuro courses and realize that that's really what I was passionate about. So it's kind of in my third year that I made that shift, and I started to really think about what options could be there for me in the psych field of things. So yeah, I think it's definitely natural to pivot, and our interests can change over time as well. So I think just embracing that and trying to find experiences where you can.
Fantastic.
And I can add on to, I feel like even from the way I talk about it, you can probably tell I've bounced around a lot with my ideas of what I want to do and where I want to go. And even still, I feel like I'm constantly pivoting within occupational therapy because I'm always learning about new practice areas and new opportunities that we can pursue. But I feel like a lot of my learning just comes from like listening to profs and their experiences and trying to zero in on what takes my interest and what things, kind of like what information sticks in my head the best is usually the information I'm the most interested in. So I'm still definitely in that process of pivoting around and figuring out what my true interests really are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just because you've landed in a grad school program that you're feeling great in doesn't mean that you don't still have lifelong learning to do. And I think that's really a valuable message. I just want to let everybody know we do have until 11:15. I am going to ask a few more questions. You might have had a notification that the meeting was almost over, but I am going to ask a few more just to, again, take advantage of these fabulous panelists and these minds that we have with us today. I would love to know, really, for each of you, like Jessica, you've mentioned where you're headed after your current program. It sounds like that's going to be a really wonderful opportunity for you. Congratulations. Jasmyn and Christina, I wonder if you can speak to sort of in each of your fields, what are some of those next steps after you finish your program? Jasmyn, you shared with us that you've just defended your master's, which is a wonderful milestone. So where do you see sort of yourself? How long do you have left in your program, and where do you want to go after this?
Yeah, so thank you. My program technically ends in June, so it's a 2-year master's degree. And then the program that I'm in is accredited, which means that once I graduate from this program, I can register with the College of Psychotherapists of Ontario and work as a psychotherapist, or with the College of Psychologists of Ontario and work as a psych associate. So there's definitely opportunities for work right out of my specific master's degree, and a lot of the my colleagues in my program are taking that route. For me, I'm still super interested in learning more, and I actually want to shift a little bit more towards clinical psychology. So my hope for myself is to pursue a PhD, which would be about 5-ish more years, and then I would register as a psychologist. So that's kind of my path. There's definitely tons of options. And even within that, you can work in private practice, in a school board, in a hospital. So there's tons of opportunities kind of for where you can go.
Wonderful. Sounds very exciting. Just for all of you, it's wonderful. Yeah. And what about you, Christina? I imagine that once you're completed, because you're in a professional program, that you'll be able to take those next steps into the workforce. Is that sort of where you think you are headed?
Yeah, that's my plan as of now. It's similar to Jasmyn, where at the end we can write an exam and then we'll be registered occupational therapists. So yeah, I will hopefully be pursuing that. I'm still trying to figure out the practice area, but yeah, right now I'm interested in like community-based occupational therapy or like early psychosis intervention or forensics, that sort of thing. So I'm just trying to find opportunities in those areas to kind of build my knowledge and make sure that that's a good fit for me.
Wonderful. And Jessica, did you want to add anything to your next steps? I mean, you said that you've wanted to, the teaching is now definitely within your sights. Can you tell us maybe when you start your new program?
Yeah, so the program start date is September. So it's coming up, but I also have to defend my thesis relatively soon. So that's a big milestone I have to get past first before I can really get too excited about the next chapter.
And do you have approximate time of when your defense will be?
Yeah, so I am still working in the lab now. Usually you'd want to have maybe 1 to 2 months to do your thesis write-up. So I'm a little bit delayed. I lost a bit of time there with COVID in the lab. So it's looking at a July-August defense, which really crunches my timeline, but I'm optimistic that I'll get it done.
You can do it. We all believe in you. Wonderful. It sounds like you all have just wonderful futures ahead of you. So I want to, just keeping an eye on the time, I'd just like to finish with a question. Really about what it means to be a Griffin. And is there something that you think makes Griffins, Guelph grads, stand out when it comes to grad school? And Jasmyn and Christina, I wonder if you can speak to specifically as well the Bachelor of Arts and Sciences program. We have a lot of BAS students joining us this morning. So I wonder if you could maybe additionally speak to those aspects of your education that maybe you highlighted when you were applying to grad school. So maybe Jasmyn, we'll start with you if that's okay.
For sure. Yeah, I think when I was applying, I really tried to highlight that kind of interdisciplinary, unique background that I had. And I know for some of my applications, you actually had the opportunity to provide some supplemental or additional information. And so I took that to kind of describe what the program was, because it is a unique program and not all grad schools kind of understand exactly what that means. So I really wanted to highlight that I did have all the prerequisites and I had the research experience and all of those things to kind of check the boxes, but also just describe, I was trying to highlight how what I was learning in my science or my neuroscience courses, like how they were helping me understand my psych courses differently, and tried to really highlight how they kind of worked together. But I think that Guelph is such a great school, and I think anytime, anywhere you meet a Guelph alumni, there's just that kind of special connection. And so I think, highlighting what a kind of unique and close-knit school and community we have is really helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you. Christina, what about you? What do you think makes a Griffin stand out, maybe particularly a Bachelor of Arts and Sciences Griffin?
Yeah, so I really emphasized the interdisciplinary nature of BAS when I was applying, just because it was super relevant to what I was going into, and kind of how the skills I had learned in the BAS program would help me to be successful and help me to kind of be a cut above the rest in like understanding OT and working as an OT, especially because it's a healthcare profession. Like being able to communicate with other healthcare professions, I really emphasize the knowledge translation skills that you learn in BAS and like how valuable that is in healthcare. And then just as a Griffin, I feel like we're so lucky where Guelph is a small community and you make so many good connections and there's so many opportunities to meet people. And I feel like that was really valuable for me applying, was having the opportunity as a Griffin to take the different opportunities and learn to be an advocate for interdisciplinary studies and an advocate for the BAS program. And being able to learn from lots of different people across lots of different disciplines.
Wonderful. And Jessica, what about you? You'll be journeying to a new university after an undergraduate and now grad program here at Guelph. Maybe you could speak to, again, what that sort of special magic is about being a Guelph grad.
Yeah, so as you've noticed, I'm still here, so I really enjoyed my time here spent at Guelph. I would say from the perspective of doing a Bachelor's of Science, we have the opportunity to do a fourth-year undergrad project, and it sounds like you can in the BAS as well. And that definitely stands out, especially if you're applying for thesis, graduate work. So if you have that opportunity, I definitely recommend it. And yeah, that's about all the more I can add to that question.
That's great. Thank you so much. Just a couple final thoughts. First off, we also have a question that's just come in. Is it possible for some of the students joining you today to reach out after the session? I know that they would love to connect with you, whether it's via email or even on LinkedIn, to chat more about your journeys. We do want to encourage this as a networking opportunity. So if everybody is comfortable with that, we'll definitely provide ways that you can reach out to our amazing panelists this morning. And I wonder if we can just sort of sign off, each of you providing your sort of best tidbit of advice. You know, we've got students who are mid-degree who are maybe starting to think about grad school. What is your biggest piece of advice that they should take away from the session this morning? Jessica, if you'd like to start, that would be great.
Sure. So just off the top of my head, kind of putting myself in your shoes in third and fourth year, I was feeling pretty lost. And what probably would have been helpful is you don't have to have all the answers now. You can make mistakes. You can go back, change your mind. So definitely just follow what you're passionate about and what excites you. So my mom usually does this trick with me. She puts her two hands behind her back, and option A, option B, I choose a hand. And if I'm excited about it, then I chose the right one. If I'm rather disappointed, then I know I wanted the other one. That's kind of just the instinctual. If you have to make a really quick decision, it puts you on the spot, so you kind of figure it out quickly, I suppose. But yeah, that's about all I would say with that.
That's great advice. A trick for everybody to take home with them today. Jasmyn, what about you? What's your final nugget of wisdom, your advice here?
I would say just to believe in yourself and don't be afraid to hear no and just keep trying and trying. And I kind of thought about it after as well. I have an older sister who also graduated from Guelph, and she took 3 years to get into medical school, but she knew she wanted to get in, and she applied and applied. And took those years to work and kind of better herself or better her application, and finally got in. So don't be afraid if it takes a little bit of time, and don't let that discourage you. If it's something you're passionate about, you'll get there eventually.
Fantastic. So inspiring. Christina, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think similar to what Jasmyn said, like, don't count yourself out from the beginning. You don't know until you try. And if it does take you longer, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you do make a decision and you go down a road and it was the wrong decision, people change their minds all the time. There are people in my program who they've worked for 10 years and now they're finding occupational therapy. So people change their mind all the time. And I think the only other thing would be to like really take advantage of your connections and like having conversations with people, and you learn so much from other people's experiences and perspectives. And I found that that's really helped me to get to where I am now. And I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't had those conversations. So.
Wonderful. And I hope this panel has been a fabulous networking opportunity, a great conversation to have to get everybody feeling inspired by the possibilities of grad school. For those of us joining this morning, please join me in thanking Jessica, Jasmyn, Christina for their time this morning. It's been wonderful to have all of you back as alum and as wonderful grad school mentors, ambassadors. Oh yes, you can use these great little applause Teams bits now. Again, we really appreciate all of the students, faculty, staff who have joined us this morning for this session. We have some fabulous conference offerings today and next Tuesday, so definitely check out the website if you'd like to join us again. But as you can see, the chat is really full of thank yous and appreciative messages. So with that, thank you so much. Thanks again for joining us, audience, and again to our panelists. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing such wonderful insights. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.